Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and the fallout continues from yesterday's blockbuster testimony of Hunter Biden's former business partner, Devon Archer, and confirmation that the big guy was very much involved in the business of the family. That business, of course, was selling access to the big guy. Joining us right now is the founder of Americano Media, former Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Services, and former advisor to President Trump, Michael Caputo. Michael, thank you for joining us. Is it fair to say the walls are closing in on the Biden presidency?
You know, that term is so overused in the context of Donald Trump. I think walls are always moving. I remember when it was imminent that Roger Stone was going to be arrested. Every Friday was Roger Stone Day over at CNN. Because I would get a call every Friday morning, are they coming? And it got to be a point where it was ridiculous. Obviously, there's more afoot here with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden than we ever saw in any of the bogus investigations and impeachments of Donald Trump. It's really, I think, going to be inescapable at some point. But this has been going on for a long time. And Larry, even though we're going to hopefully snare Hunter Biden and the other culprits in this scandal, this is something that the children of both sides of the aisle have been doing for many, many years.
Yeah, it is. In fact, if you read the New York Times or Washington Post or watch some of the coverage on this, they sort of acted like, well, yeah, this is how business is done. They're complicit.
That's true. You know, and if Don Trump Jr. or Eric Trump or anybody in that family had done 1/100th of this, if they had made one phone call, remember, they had a meeting that they went to in Trump Tower with a woman who was kind of connected between different leaps of faith to the Russian government. And that meeting alone, where they just listened to her and said, thank you very much, they tried to use that to bring down the entire Trump administration.
Yeah.
Here, we have the vice president of the United States at the time calling into meetings with the most corrupt people in the world. I mean, I lived in Moscow at the behest of the Clinton administration in the 90s. And Ms. Baturina, this Russian oligarch, the most rich woman in Russia, when I was there, she wasn't so rich. She was simply the mayor's wife. But she is a thug in a dress.
Yeah.
And the vice president of the United States is talking to her on the phone. And let me tell you something, it wasn't about the weather.
Yeah, and I think he dropped by a dinner party at Cafe Milano. And I love the way the media covers this. It's like, well, he just dropped by on his way home. The man is the vice president. If he's driving home in a motorcade from the White House, he goes up Connecticut, DuPont Circle, straight up Mass Avenue to the Naval Observatory. You divert a vice presidential motorcade to Georgetown during rush hour with Secret Service? That's not just a little side trip, Michael Caputo.
It's not. And Larry, I know you've been there for a while. Cafe Milano is a shady place.
Oh, yeah.
It's very high end, very expensive, but it's filled with expensive hookers. It is probably one of the shadiest places in Washington, D.C., in the heart of Georgetown. I can tell you that sitting down with a corrupt oligarch from Russia, as you know, kind of on a side trip from on your way home to the vice president's mansion, to the Naval Observatory, it's absolutely shady from the very beginning of that story. Honestly, as someone who spent a lot of time in Ukraine, who has family in Ukraine, I shot a film and wrote a book about the Burisma scandal as it was just starting to become known. They'll do anything to stop this information from coming out. I don't blame Devon Archer for fearing for his life. They went after me because of my book, The Ukraine Hoax.
Yeah.
And more importantly, because of my film of the same name. But because they would do anything to stop the Hunter Biden mess from becoming public. Remember, all the lies they told before the election about Hunter's laptop. It's the same pressure they were putting on me and my team after the election to try to make sure that the things that I wrote would never make it out.
Michael, you've been predicting for the last couple of times we've talked here on O'Connor tonight that Biden will not be the nominee and it'll be Michelle Obama. I'm guessing that hasn't changed here, but has the timeline for Biden actually maybe even leaving office prematurely, is that heightened now?
Well, you know, I think there's a theory going around. I think a lot of different talk show hosts and stuff are talking about it, where this is going to end up in Joe Biden pardoning his son and probably just saying he's not going to run for re-election. I still think that's the timeline.
Okay.
The problem that the Democrats have if it's a free-for-all in the primaries and caucuses on the Democrat side, an absolute bloodbath because the president suddenly pulled out, they're not going to be able to control who wins. My guess
so
is
they need to wait until after the primary season, so it's a convention decision.
it is, and I think that means we're going to see so many contortions and twists and turns, and see the goalposts move so many times from, Joe Biden never spoke to his son about his business. Joe Biden is not in business with his son. Joe Biden didn't actually take the deposit. Joe Biden, gave all that money to orphanages. These goalposts are going to move over and over again.
Michael, considering what you went through with the Crossfire Hurricane investigation under James Comey, and then eventually Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation, you had to basically go into debt with your legal fees. They never charged you with anything, but this is how this Justice Department worked. It squeezed you, trying to get you to turn on Donald Trump. I'd love for you to take a look at one really revealing piece of evidence from Hunter Biden's laptop. This is a text exchange with Devon Archer. This came on, let's take a look at it. This came the day that Devon Archer was arrested. And look at this. Devon Archer says, "Why did your dad's administration appointees arrest me and try to put me in jail?" This is when Donald Trump was president, right? And he's not asking, why did the Justice Department come after me? Why did Trump's Justice Department come after me? He's specifically saying, why did your dad's administration appointees arrest me? Which suggests that Devon Archer and Hunter Biden thought, hey, as long as it's our guys' appointees, we're in the clear. Right there, that's corruption.
It truly is. And every step of the way, my exposure to the Department of Justice and the FBI, it was very clear. This was during the Trump, first 4 years of the Trump administration. It was very clear that they did not work for Donald Trump, that they were working for the Democrats. By the way, it was the same feeling you got at the Republican-controlled Senate Committee on Intelligence. The Democrats were running those interrogations. So in reality, Devon Archer knew that his father's appointees controlled the Department of Justice. In the end, they're so burrowed in there. Donald Trump often talks about the weaponization of the deep state and how he needs to clean house when he comes back. They were burrowed in so deeply. There's only one way to fix this. We have to shatter the FBI. We have to shatter the Department of Justice and then scatter them 10 ways from Sunday through the winds. Because frankly, these people are so criminally corrupt and so deeply into all aspects of the Department of Justice and its Democrat FBI. There's no other way to fix it than to destroy it first.
Everything that we've learned here, we've only got 30 seconds left, but everything that we're learning now, the FBI and the Justice Department certainly could have investigated on their own, and yet they refuse to. Is it just political bias? Is there more to it than that?
Well, I think there are people at the top levels of these national security agencies that are in on the joke and probably even profiting from it. Like I said before, both Democrats and Republicans play this game. The Democrats are just much better at it. In the end, what we find out about Joe Biden and Hunter will give us really good information as to what we need to look for further.
Michael Caputo, hey, everybody should check out Americano Media. It's Spanish language media, but from an American patriotic perspective. Love that. Thank you for joining us, Michael. Always good to talk with you.
Thank you.
There is more to come. Keep it here. It's O'Connor Tonight on Salem News Channel. Today's August 1st. The Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primaries are in January, and we haven't even had the first debate yet in the Republican nominating process. But by the looks of things, and certainly by the New York Times standard, it's over. And I don't know about you, but as a good conservative Republican, I always follow the lead of the New York Times. Here's their latest poll. Trump at 54%, DeSantis at 17%. Of course, that's a national poll, and I don't know, last time I checked, we don't pick our candidates with a national election. It's state by state. But to be fair, he is doing very well, Donald Trump is, in Iowa and in New Hampshire. But maybe it's a little too soon to call this one. Let's find out from our friend Chris DeGaulle. He's the host of the Chris DeGaulle podcast, found everywhere you get your podcasts. All right, Chris, is it over?
Well, first of all, why the hostility to Donald Trump? I detect hostility directed at Donald. I'm
No,
kidding.
The hostility is toward the New York Times.
That's a joke. I'm kidding. Everyone's prickly when we start talking about this.
Yes,
I know.
unless you say it is over, you're anti-Trump. In fact, I might as well get my captainship on. I'm ahoy, right?
Well, that's right. Let me just say this, and I know you share my sentiments. I'll vote for Asa Hutchinson sooner than I'll vote for Joe Biden.
Amen.
All right?
Absolutely. I have Asa fever.
Yeah, who doesn't? But he's a pain in the Asa. But I will say this: do I think that all of them have a steep hill to climb, to put it mildly, to defeat Donald Trump? I do.
Yeah.
I'm also very honest with my audience anyway, and I know you are too, that it does seem that the media is probably banking on Donald Trump being the most easy to beat. I actually think they're most frightened of the prospect of a DeSantis presidency, if I were to be wholly honest with you. I think they think Trump's a more beatable candidate in the general. I think a DeSantis presidency scares them a little more. I think they think him to be a more doctrinaire conservative, perhaps, than even Trump.
Maybe. I also think Donald Trump it tends to divide people more, and the media and the left, they sort of like that. They want us divided. They don't want us to unify around ideas and around our common principles. I think you're right about that. I mean, yes, absolutely, it's Donald Trump's race to lose. It has been since day one. Are you surprised that the challengers, specifically Ron DeSantis, they haven't really made the case of why they're the better choice? It seems like such a simple question. You know, yes, I like Donald Trump. Yes, I liked his policies, but here's why I'm the better choice this time around. That's the only question they need to answer, and they haven't been able to do it.
Yeah, and DeSantis seems like he's tried going the social issues route, and I've been fascinated with it because I've actually seen focus groups on this, and I've talked with some people inside Team DeSantis. I've seen this with my own eyes. It's remarkable. You go to a group of Trump voters, and you ask them about the trans issue, for instance, the LGBTQ agenda in public schools, for instance, and you say, what specifically has Donald Trump done to tackle this as president? And strident Trump supporters don't quite know what to say about that. They assume he's against it. They believe he's against it. And yeah, he's probably said since that he's against it, but DeSantis has actually the track record. Now, I want to be clear here with your audience, just so I don't tick people off and you don't get hate mail. I've already gone on the record as saying if I'm voting in the primary, I'm voting for Donald Trump. Having said that, I have to defer to DeSantis and give him credit. He owns the lane of the social issues for the most part, save abortion. Yeah. There is one. And it's interesting, DeSantis is taking on water this week from pro-lifers who say he won't commit to this national abortion ban the way Trump has. So there's a conflict there on the social issues front. Trump owns a lane. DeSantis owns a lane. They both can credibly argue that. Yeah. I don't know who wins that. It's sort of a jump ball to me.
The fact that President Trump is not going to participate in the debate later this month, as of now, he might change his mind, and maybe even a couple of other debates. That means that really the race is who's going to be the man left standing, or woman, to take on Trump head on. How do you think that, set Trump aside, what's the rest of the field look like? Because as of now, DeSantis is really fading back into the pack.
Yeah, I don't know who even comes closer to, well, that's not true. I've noticed that the DeSantis people are taking swipes at Ramaswamy now. And that tells me that Ramaswamy is starting to gain traction. I'll give you an anecdote. My sons, who will both be of legal age to vote for the first time when the primary comes around to them, they're very enthusiastic about Vivek. You might also note that there was a study that just came out, I think, in The Hill and a couple of other places this week, that young men, just my son's age, are starting to trend more conservative than ever before.
Oh, yes, I saw that. With keen interest. We have a son, the son's the same age, actually. We don't have a son together. I don't want anyone to have a misconception.
That would affect the social issues.
Yeah, exactly. That is interesting, and I think that Vivek is an important voice for the younger Republican men in particular.
And that's threatening to DeSantis. That's bad news for DeSantis. A lot of people are wondering who might Trump align himself with. And Vivek, you could argue, has been made, he won't say it this way, but when I've talked to them about, after he was indicted by Jack Smith, Vivek ran down to Miami and stood out inside the courtroom and said, "This is an injustice. I want everybody to stay." It's like Vivek is almost auditioning. You get the sense,
right?
Almost auditioning for the number 2 slot.
But I think that's a good way to go. If you're running for the Republican primary right now against Donald Trump, the only way to run is to be as pro-Trump as possible and then fight, say, yes, I like this, I like this, I like this, and yes, there's injustice against the man, but when all is said and done, here's why I'm the better choice. It's a tough one. We've never seen a race like this before where candidates have to make that case.
Yeah, I just interviewed Steve Moore today, who, in full disclosure, has signed on officially with the Trump team as well. But I said, here's DeSantis' economic plan. He just rolled out with this yesterday. He's going to tariffs on China. He's going to reduce spending. He's going to lower taxes. And Steve said, yeah, I mean, the spending part is obviously not Trump's bailiwick, but on taxes, on regulations, on China, Steve's point was, yeah, but my guy's already doing that.
Yeah.
So even that's tough for DeSantis to stand out.
Oh, on yesterday's program, we had DeSantis' chief policy guy on to talk about the economic plan, and I asked 3 different ways. How exactly is this different than what President Trump's economic policy was when he was president? And I couldn't tell you what the answer was, frankly.
I feel sorry for these people. I really, earnestly, I like Governor DeSantis a lot. I'd be an enthusiastic backer of his if he won.
Yeah.
I just don't, from the very beginning, I don't know how any of these people stand a prayer. The media does nothing but talk about Donald Trump. Every day they sit down for, Jake Tapper's big sit down with Ron DeSantis was on the same day he's indicted.
Right.
And it's like, the poor guy can't catch a break.
Chris, let me ask you, started by saying the conventional wisdom is that Trump wins the primary, and that's good for Democrats because he's more vulnerable in the general election. Is that still the case? I mean, one argument the Biden team made, certainly in 2020, is Trump fatigue. They don't want to worry about the scandals anymore and the drama and the divisions and everything. Well, look at that drama with the Biden family and with the scandals there and the march toward impeachment. I mean, that sort of takes that off the table, doesn't it?
I would sure think so. I ask that kind of rhetorically all the time. The Democrats believe that Donald Trump belongs in an orange jumpsuit. Those of us who are watching the news and reporting on it and talking about it honestly know the Bidens belong in orange jumpsuits. Mm-hmm. So it seems we're at an impasse. And if, in fact, this is where we're going, we're watching 2 men, both of whom supporters believe the other belongs in a jumpsuit.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we've ever seen anything quite like this before. But I think, Will Hurd, that scumbag congressman, Republican from Texas, said that Trump is running to stay out of prison. Well, I think you could probably say the same thing about the family Biden.
And I would argue the closest we've come, you just said, maybe rhetorically, we haven't seen this before. The closest we came was in 2016. And, Trump emerged victorious. To that end, in fact, in our final minute here, Chris DeGaulle, do you think Biden even makes it to the general election next year? Because I'm starting to hear more and more people raising that doubt very seriously, and not just because of his age.
I could totally entertain him not making it. What I don't really go for is this notion that in steps Gavin Newsom. I don't know how, if Biden doesn't make it, I don't know how it can be anybody but Kamala Harris. Larry Elder said it well some time ago. Black Democrats would never allow the first black woman to be passed over for a white guy from California. There's just no way in the world, and I tend to agree with him. Democrats want Kamala Harris over Joe Biden?
I think you're going down the right trail, but according to our guest earlier tonight, Michael Caputo, who is an advisor to Donald Trump, he thinks the answer is going to be Michelle Obama at the end of the day. That's the only person who could maybe circumvent Kamala Harris. We'll leave it there. Chris DeGaulle, always good to touch base with you. Check him out at the Chris DeGaulle podcast, everywhere you cast your pod. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. All the revelations we're now picking up on from the Biden family scandals, with all that money flowing from Ukrainian interests into the Biden family, and then Vice President Biden, now President Biden's insistence that we just open the national treasury and help that country out no matter what, no questions asked. In fact, if you ask questions, you're a traitor. It all sort of makes sense, doesn't it? And yes, we continue to fund the war effort in Ukraine. And no, you're not allowed to ask any questions about it, except for maybe here we actually ask questions. And one of the people who helps us answer those questions is Tony Shaffer, former U.S. Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel, author of Operation Dark Heart. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Always great to be here, Larry. Thanks for having me.
And before we begin this questioning, this patriotic duty that we have, let's both go on the record to say, Russia's the bad guy. They had no business crossing the border with their tanks and invading Ukraine. It was an act of aggression, and the Ukrainian people deserve to fight for their country. Just wanted to make sure everyone...
Well, I agree with you. Well, look, I'm with you on this, but my job is to call balls and strikes. So
Right.
no matter who was right or wrong, I just got to give a clear assessment. So let's start with the amount of money. So
Yeah.
this is from the Progressive Caucus. It's available online. It's $113 billion have gone to Ukraine in this war, and this is not just about military support, Larry. We're actually funding their civil service. We're providing retirement funds. Look, I don't remember in the Constitution where it says we're supposed to be providing comfort and aid to countries regarding their
Yes.
civil service bureaucracy. I can understand the military, but we're talking about a range of things that goes way beyond military support.
Well,
and this goes to your point, Larry, about the Biden corruption. Why would you be giving so much money
right.
to non-military things? I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
It's almost like President Zelensky and major powerful people within the Ukrainian culture and stratosphere have dirt on the guy, and he's doing whatever he can to keep it quiet. We're also told that it's all humanitarian, Tony.
No.
And Ukrainians' efforts are purely self-defense.
No. Look, as I said, they've given massive loans, forgiven those loans. I mean, Larry, wouldn't you like to walk into the bank and you say, hey, could I have a loan for $50 million? They say, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then 10 days later, it's like, remember that loan we gave you? Don't worry about paying it back. You're good.
Yeah.
I mean, who does that? Well, we do that. And again, it goes to why are we doing this and who's actually benefiting? So that's not humanitarian support. That's just routine support. That's what we taxpayers pay every day to support regarding our own government. So this is not about helping the Ukrainian people. It's about something else, and that something else is what we should be asking questions about.
Yeah, and by the way, a measure put forth in Congress to actually just have a separate inspector general to audit and keep track of the $100+ billion that went to Ukraine. That got voted down. They didn't get enough support.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So months it's 18 months in now, believe it or not, to this military aggression. Russia still has not really made any inroads beyond the first 6 weeks of the campaign. Where do things stand right now as Ukraine appears to be going on a pretty legitimate offensive?
They did. So last year, as a matter of fact, speaking of the prior offensive, the Ukrainians were very successful in pushing Russia out. They reduced the Russian footprint from about 25% holdings to about, 16%. It was a massive reduction. But the Russians have continued to hold on to that 16% of their landmass very, very well. And they've done a number of things to make life very difficult for the Ukrainians to be successful in their current offensive. By most accounts, the current offensive started on or about the 8th of June. And by most accounts, while they've gone back and forth, they've probably retained about 15 kilometers in most places. It's not been super successful. I attribute this to a number of factors, but we can go through that if you want.
In a moment, because overall strategy here, we've been told that, of course, Ukraine is on the defensive here. They're just trying to protect their borders. They want to drive Russia out. Right. But we're getting more and more reports of drone attacks that actually go well into Russian territory, some of them close to Moscow. Is that the hallmark of a defensive military campaign?
It's a hallmark of desperation. It's an act of terror. Both sides have engaged in acts of terror. When you start putting drones into civilian areas, Larry, it's an act of terror. Both sides have done this. So again, I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying, if you're sending drones into Moscow, into the financial district to blow it up, that's an act of terror. And Russia's done the same thing, going after Ukrainian infrastructure. I'm just saying that if you look at how this is playing out, if you're doing that kind of play, you're not actually engaging and winning on the battlefield. It's a distraction.
That has increased and escalated the rhetoric in this campaign. Russian official Dmitry Medvedev said that Russia could use a nuclear weapon if Ukraine continues to penetrate into civilian areas like this. Is that just bluster?
That's bluster. I think the Russians are prepared to use nuclear weapons, but not for that. I think the potential for a nuclear weapons use has to do with a confrontation of NATO or regarding the United States, regarding an escalation of the type of weapons or what we're doing on the border. The drone thing is an annoyance. And like you said, Larry, it's like it's drawing a lot of attention, but it's not actually having that much of an impact.
So, Tony, why hasn't Russia been able to sort of finish it? Because we keep hearing their military
Yeah.
far outnumbers and has better capacity and capabilities than the Ukrainian army. Why haven't they been able to succeed here? And also, why hasn't Ukraine been able to finally push them back with all the aid that we've given? In other words, why are we still at a stalemate here, and what's the resolution?
Well, let's start off with the Russian numbers. The Russian they've probably mobilized up near 1 million men,
Wow.
have massive forces. But you need to study the Battle of Kursk to see why they're doing what they're doing, Larry. The Battle of Kursk during World War II, as a matter of fact, July of 43, they held back and let the Germans, the Nazis, and I'm not comparing the Ukrainians to Nazis.
Understood. Just that this is the same battlefield,
same
and
tactics.
Yes,
So the Nazis hit endlessly into the Russian defenses, basically weakening the Nazis to the point of where when the Russians are ready, they just kind of rolled over them. The Kursk was the last battle that the Nazis actually engaged in, and from there on, they lost every battle. So I'm saying the Russians have taken a page out of that battle, and they're letting the Ukrainians kind of, do all this military action and not make any gains. And that's why the Russians just come at me, bro.
Yeah.
And just kind of usefully do. And so I think they're hanging back to wait to see when and then to what we've given them. We still never gave them enough to win, Larry. You need to have at least 3-1 advantage. It's the other way around. The Russians have 3-1 over Ukraine. So you've got to create conditions for tactical advantage, right? That Ukraine has never been able to do that.
And then that basically explains why Ukraine is now basically sort of at a stalemate here. They're not going to be able to overwhelm. So if that's the case on both sides, why is there no movement right now to get to a peace table? Or is the Biden administration waiting until an election year to do that? We've seen this story before back in 1972 with Richard Nixon during the election year. Oh, we're the only ones who can bring peace, so you got to keep us in office.
Well, there are forces within the U.S. government that are fighting against that. There's Victoria Nuland. There's a number of folks who are, Tony Blinken, who are completely against it. Jake Sullivan. Many talk about Jake Sullivan and Victoria Nuland being the brains behind the offensive. And I'd never let people who have no military background plan your offensive, because I think that's what's been thrust upon Ukraine.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think there's any effort. And I think Biden needs to do something before next year, because this is going to see, look, the New York Times, Larry, and that's not a conservative outlet, has reported on 20% losses of the current military gear we sent them. So there's no hope in sight for a total victory. Will the Ukrainians be able to continue to hold defensively? Yeah, probably. But you're giving time to the Russians to continue to degrade your forces and allow them to continue to solidify their hold. So I just don't see anything there that's going to be good news for the Biden administration at this point.
So we just continue. And
That's
we'll
right.
go on.
Well, I think we can. I hear rumor that John Kirby is going to actually move forward and become more woke by becoming Joan Kirby. So I think he'll start wearing more skirts. So something to look forward to as his briefings progress. I think he'll look good with rouge on. Just saying.
On that vivid image, we will leave it there. Tony Schaefer, thank you, sir. Always good to talk with you. Get his book, Operation Dark Heart. I was just at the Spy Museum this weekend. It's still there on the shelves. People are buying it up. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. Have you ever heard of the Uniform Determination of Death Act? I bet you haven't. I bet you didn't even know one existed. But it's pretty important. In fact, you should know about it. It's literally a matter of life and death. It's currently being re-examined, maybe redefined and rewritten. And it's something that we have just learned about because we read an article by our next guest, Sarah St. Onge, writer at The Federalist. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I think people will be surprised to know that there is a Uniform Determination of Death Act. What does this do?
What does it do? So it's actually a legal framework, not a medical framework. It's a uniform law that's supposed to be generally followed by, all the states to determine when a person can be legally declared dead in a hospital. It kind of protects doctors from being prosecuted for, killing somebody, families from suing the doctors if they turn off a machinery after after a court order if there's an argument, that
Okay.
kind of thing.
I should also suspect that it aids families when they're making those really agonizing decisions about what kind of continued care they provide to loved ones. And this is a time, obviously, when there's a lot of emotion running high and sometimes disagreements among family members. To have sort of a uniform guideline framework to go by can be helpful.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not anti-uniformed, I'm not anti-turning off a machine if somebody's obviously has passed away.
Right.
I've unfortunately had to make that decision in my life. So,
Right. So how
I'm
do
not
you
against
define
this
death?
concept.
Somebody's heart could still be pumping, but there is literally no activity in the brain. Is that person dead? Or you can keep their heart pumping mechanically, but is that the right thing to do? All right. So that leads us to your article and what's now being contemplated, which is sort of redefining the terms of death. What's at play here?
Okay, so what's at play here is in the United States, in order to declare somebody brain dead, there has to be whole brain death, meaning it's not just the brainstem has been damaged, which is the norm in other places, but the entire brain has to be completely gone for them to be declared dead. And that is something that there's been a lot of conflict over because it allows people who may, like the case I mentioned in the article, Jahi McMath, it may allow a little bit of discrepancy between whether somebody is actually completely has passed away or whether it's just they've suffered a catastrophic injury. As it is now, we are not in line with other countries, and we are also not in line just each individually between the states in the United States. New Jersey, for example, does not accept the concept of brain death as a legal designation for death. So you can have somebody who is completely dependent on machines, but if there is a heartbeat and the respiration from mechanical ventilation and absolutely no brain activity, they are still alive in the state of New Jersey, but they're not alive in the state of Connecticut. It's just,
What I found quite chilling, Sarah, is that you lay out the reasons why this Uniform Determination of Death Act is now being revised, or why they're trying to implement changes. The first is to make it more difficult for families, and especially families of minor children, to file suit against hospitals. Okay, that's the lawyers talking. But the other two reasons, to free up hospital beds and medical resources and to make available more organs for harvesting donations. That's kind of chilling, that they want to expedite this death process and the decision so they can do what they will with the bed and with the organs on the dead body. That's awful.
Yeah.
What
it is. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is what's in the documents.
Yeah.
The perspective changes.
Is there anyone at the table on this that comes from a moral perspective or a faith-based perspective? Or is that not allowed in these discussions anymore?
I think that it's not. No, I don't think so, because that's the impetus behind the New Jersey difference. Is Orthodox Jewish people don't consider brain death to be compatible with their religious beliefs. A lot of Orthodox or more conservative Christian denominations also don't, but it's mainly the Jewish congregations have pushed that forward in New Jersey. There is none, because legally, once somebody is dead, according to the law, religion cannot really figure into that. It's almost, it's kind of interesting that it's almost the opposite of what we argue, or what I shouldn't say what pro-life people argue regarding how the law shouldn't allow abortion because a person is alive from the moment they're conceived. They're actually arguing the opposite in this case, and it's just very interesting because those two don't often aren't in that juxtaposition.
Without some foundational ethical principles involved here, or a transcendent morality, whether it's faith-based or what have you, it seems like the path they're walking down here, Sarah, could lead you to the obvious exploitation of disabled individuals.
Well, it could, because you can suffer a catastrophic brainstem injury and still be alive. That's the difference between requiring just a brainstem injury and the whole brain injury. There's some concern as well that people who are capable of giving permission willingly are going to be able to have themselves declared capable or available for organ donation if they choose. There's a lot of dynamics here that are at play that I don't think are really people don't really understand or know about, in the bigger spectrum. And it's go ahead, I'm sorry.
Actually, no, that's fine. That leads me to sort of how this is even coming about. You cite this organization, the Uniform Law Commission. Who are they?
Yeah.
I didn't vote for them.
I didn't vote for them either. And until I actually started researching this about a year or maybe 6 months ago, it actually came from a conversation online about whether the designation of brain death was actually created in order to provide organs. And my position is they definitely walk hand in hand. But evidently this is an organization or a federal bureaucracy that makes decisions about uniform laws that just everybody's supposed to follow. And they're hired in appointed positions. There's no, some are voluntary. It's just a very interesting, and it's not just on medical care. There are tax laws. There are all kinds of stuff that this organization, its tentacles kind of, I shouldn't say that. That sounded conspiracy. But the spider web goes out.
No, I get it. It is. I started to go down the rabbit hole on it as well after I read your article. Just 30 seconds left here. There's also quite a bit of discussion with regard to euthanasia, freeing up euthanasia laws. We see what's going on in Canada. There's a push here in America to make it fair. This plays into that too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I live in New York right now, and we're considering euthanasia, legalized assisted suicide, actually, in New York now. It's going through the legislature. And unfortunately, it looks like it may possibly pass, which is a shame. Beyond a shame.
There used to be some things in this country that were sort of bipartisan and everyone could agree on. And it seems like one side of the political spectrum continues to move toward policies that devalue human life. And that's something we should all pay attention to. Sarah St. Onge, we got to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for writing this piece. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight. It's a good thing for you that you watch O'Connor Tonight on this outlet here on Salem News Channel, because it means you're informed. You were prepared for yesterday's blockbuster testimony from Devin Archer, the former business partner of Hunter Biden, testifying and corroborating so much of what we know about that family's corrupt businesses. In fact, you already knew all of the lies that Joe Biden's been saying about his son's business, and you already know that much of what the Biden family was involved with overseas actually affected our American policy with regard to Ukraine and other countries. We've detailed that for you, right? But imagine for a moment if your sole source of news and information was MSNBC. Imagine just hours before yesterday's testimony, you tuned in and you watched Morning Joe to be informed. This is what you would have seen.
Thank you for being with us this morning, and we'll begin the week with the latest on former President Donald Trump. Trump's. We heard from Trump.
Donald Trump, Mr. Trump, Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump's mouth.
Trump advisors, Trump.
The Trump situation, Trump's.
President Trump.
Donald Trump, 4 more years.
Trump. As it relates to Trump, Donald Trump, and that's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump himself and Trumpism.
Donald Trump's Donald Trump.
Yeah, and Trump is.
I'm Donald Trump.
Hang on. So Donald Trump's Donald Trump still ahead on Morning Joe. Donald Trump plus. We've got Trump plus Trump. That's former President Trump. Let's start with President Trump, former President Trump.
Donald Trump, the Trump world.
Donald Trump.
Trump train. Donald Trump.
With Trump. Donald Trump's employees. Great analysis as always. Thank you for joining us this morning. And still ahead here on Morning Joe, Donald Trump.
Yeah. They are going to get that guy elected, aren't they? And that was just 1 hour of yesterday's morning show. And oh, let's see the coverage of the testimony of Hunter Biden's former business partner, preparing the viewers for this very important story that could very well lead to the impeachment of Joe Biden. Let's see how they covered it. They didn't. There's nothing to show you. Maybe you're a reader of the New York Times, though, where you're a little better informed, right? Well, after yesterday's hearing, they actually did write up a story covering what Devon Archer said, or really they covered up what he said. Here, take a gander at this sentence. It's long been known that the elder Mr. Biden at times interacted with his son's business partners. That's just not true. That's a lie. I mean, let me reword that sentence. It's long been known that everything Joe Biden has denied up until now was false, because he's denied having any understanding or interactions with Hunter Biden's business partners. Hell, he's denied he had any interaction with Hunter Biden himself, the son. He claimed he never talked to him about any of his business. So how could the New York Times dare to even make that assertion? Well, they make it because, well, their readers are woefully uninformed about so much of what's going on in the world, because they're not in the business of news or information. They're in the business of pushing their agenda. So, in the spirit of trying to help people out, I want you to share this with all your friends on social media, because I will quickly synopsize exactly the problem with Joe Biden and why he's about to be impeached. Yesterday, we had testimony from Devon Archer that confirmed that Hunter Biden would often connect his father on the phone or in person at times when Hunter Biden was entertaining business clients. And those business clients were giving Hunter Biden money, the Biden family money, so that they could gain access to that man, Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States. During one phone call, he had executives from a gas and oil company known as Burisma in Ukraine, and they hired Hunter Biden and the firm to ensure they had that access. Well, Burisma and the executives at that company were under investigation, criminal investigation, from the government of Ukraine. And we learned in testimony yesterday that the Burisma executives put pressure on Hunter Biden to make sure that the Obama administration did something to get them out of trouble. And, well, I'll let Vice President Joe Biden finish the story.
Said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch.
They fired him all right. And the Biden family's clients, Burisma, were in the clear. And they got what they paid for. They got access to Joe Biden, and eventually they got policy from the Obama administration. And that, my MSNBC viewers, is why Joe Biden is on the road to impeachment. Consider yourself informed. That's it for tonight. There's more to come tomorrow on O'Connor Tonight. In the meantime, I'll see you on the radio.